You've been sold a lie and it's costing you thousands. The average car in America gets scrapped around 150,000 miles. Mine? 703,000 miles on the original engine and transmission. Same car I bought in 2001. I'm going to show you the 17 habits that kept it running while everyone else has ended up in the junkyard. Some of these will contradict everything your dealership told you. Others will seem almost too simple. But I've got the repair bills and maintenance records to prove every single one works. Stick around until the end because trick number 1 literally takes 5 seconds every time you park, but it saved me from a $3,200 transmission replacement twice. Let's get into it. Trick 17, change your oil. Every 3,000 miles, your owner's manual says 10,000 miles between oil changes, maybe even 15,000 if you've got one of those newer models. Here's what that manual doesn't tell you. Those intervals are designed to get your car past the warranty period, not to 300,000 miles. I've opened up engines that religiously followed the manufacturer's schedule. What I found looked like someone poured concrete inside. The oil passages were clogged with sludge. The pistons had carbon baked onto them so thick I needed a chisel. The camshaft lobes were scarred from metal-on-metal contact. This is what happens when you trust a company that makes more money selling you a new car than keeping your old one running. Here's the reality. Your oil breaks down from heat, contaminants, and shear forces. In stop-and-go traffic, that breakdown happens faster. Short trips where the engine never fully warms up, even faster. The oil might still look amber-colored at 7,500 miles, but it's already lost its ability to protect. I change my oil every 3,000 miles with conventional oil, or every 5,000 with full synthetic. Yes, it costs more over the life of the car. I've spent roughly $8,000 on oil changes over 23 years, but I've never needed an engine rebuild, which runs $4,500 minimum. Do the math. Trick 16, drive gently for the first 2 miles. Every winter morning I see my neighbors. They start their cars, then sit there idling for 10 or 15 minutes. They think they're warming up the engine. What they're actually doing is drowning their cylinders in unburned gasoline. Here's what happens during a long idle. The engine runs rich because it's cold. That means extra fuel gets pumped in. But without the load of actually driving, that fuel doesn't burn completely. Instead, it washes down the cylinder walls, stripping away the protective oil film. I've seen engines where the oil looked and smelled like gasoline, not because of a fuel system leak, but from months of long warm-up idles. Those engines had scored cylinder walls and burned through oil like it was going out of style. The correct method takes 30 seconds. Start the car, count to 30 while you adjust your mirrors or put on your seatbelt, then drive away gently. Keep it under 2,500 RPM for the first 2 miles. This brings everything up to temperature 8 times faster than idling. The oil circulates properly, the catalytic converter lights off sooner, and you're not dumping raw fuel where it doesn't belong. I've been doing this for over 2 decades, through Michigan winters where it hits negative 15 degrees. Never had an issue. Trick 15, stop when the pump clicks. I used to top off my tank. Everyone does it. The pump clicks off, but you know there's more room in there, so you squeeze in another half gallon. Seems harmless, right? It's not. Your gas tank isn't just a sealed container. It's connected to an evaporative emission system. There's a charcoal canister that captures fuel vapors so they don't escape into the atmosphere. That system needs airspace in your tank to work properly. When you overfill, you're forcing liquid gasoline into vapor lines. I've replaced charcoal canisters that were completely saturated with fuel. They cost between $350 and $900 depending on the vehicle. Some of them require dropping the entire fuel tank to access. One guy at my old shop overfilled every single time for 3 years. He thought he was being smart, getting his money's worth. Then his check engine light came on. EVAP system large leak detected. The canister was ruined, the purge valve was stuck, and fuel was actually dripping out of a vent line. That repair hit $1,100. All because he couldn't walk away when the pump clicked. When it clicks, you're done. That's not the pump being stingy. That's the pump detecting that the tank is full enough to function correctly. Trick 14, change transmission fluid every 60,000 miles. There's this myth that transmission fluid is lifetime. Some manufacturers even say it in their service manuals. Lifetime fill never needs changing. That's technically true if by lifetime they mean the warranty period. Transmission fluid breaks down. It gets contaminated with clutch material, metal particles, and varnish. By 60,000 miles, it's not really fluid anymore. It's more like liquid sandpaper. I drain and fill my transmission every 60,000 miles. Not a flush, just a drain and fill. That gets out about 40% of the old fluid and replaces it with fresh. Some people say you should never change old transmission fluid because it's the only thing holding the transmission together. That's only true if the fluid has never been changed. If you've been maintaining it, changing it won't hurt anything. The fluid in my transmission still looks red at 703,000 miles. I've never had a slip, a shudder, or a delay in shifting. Meanwhile, I've seen people come in with 90,000 miles on a transmission that's slipping itself to death. The fluid looks like Coca-Cola and smells like a burnt clutch. At that point, you're not fixing it with a fluid change. You're looking at a $3,500 rebuild. Use the exact fluid your manufacturer specifies. Toyota uses WS fluid. Honda uses DW1. Don't let some quick lube place talk you into universal ATF. It's not universal if it destroys your transmission. Trick 13. Coast to stops and use engine braking. I almost never use my brakes hard. I'm always looking 3 or 4 cars ahead, watching for brake lights, anticipating when the traffic is going to slow down. When I see it coming, I let off the gas early and coast. This does 2 things. It saves fuel because the engine goes into deceleration fuel cutoff mode. And it saves my brakes because I'm not converting momentum into heat at the last second. Every time you slam on the brakes, you're creating a 1,200-degree heat spike in your rotors. Do that enough times and the rotors warp. The pads glaze over. The brake fluid starts to boil. I've gone 120,000 miles on a single set of front brake pads before. Most people replace theirs every 30,000 to 40,000. The key is reading traffic and being smooth. If you're constantly on the brakes, you're not driving efficiently. You're reacting to situations you should have seen coming. And when you do need to replace brake parts, don't cheap out. I use OEM or quality aftermarket like Akabono. I tried cheap pads once. They squealed like a dying animal and ate through my rotors in 15,000 miles. Spent more money fixing that mistake than I saved on the cheap pads. Trick 12. Flush coolant every 3 to 5 years. Coolant doesn't last forever. The additives that prevent corrosion break down over time. The fluid becomes acidic and starts eating away at your radiator, heater core, and water pump seals. I flush my coolant every 4 years regardless of mileage. That's kept my cooling system leak-free for over 700,000 miles. The original radiator is still in the car. I did replace the water pump at 340,000 miles, but that's normal wear. Here's what most people don't realize. If your engine overheats even once, you can warp the cylinder head. Modern aluminum heads warp at around 230 degrees. Once that happens, you're looking at a head gasket job minimum. I've seen repair bills over $3,000 for overheating damage, all because someone ignored the temperature gauge for 8 minutes trying to make it home instead of pulling over. If your temperature gauge ever goes into the red zone, shut the engine off immediately. Don't try to limp it anywhere. Call a tow truck. 20 minutes of waiting is cheaper than $3,500 in repairs. And never mix coolant colors. Red, green, yellow, orange, they're not compatible. Each one has different additives for different metals in your cooling system. Mixing them creates a chemical reaction that turns your coolant into sludge. Use exactly what your owner's manual specifies. Trick 11. Find coolant leaks before they find you. Coolant doesn't evaporate. If your reservoir is going down, you have a leak. I check my coolant level once a month. Takes 30 seconds. Pop the hood, look at the overflow tank, make sure it's between the mine and max lines. If it's low, I don't just top it off and forget about it. I find out why it's low. Common leak points are the radiator, hoses, water pump, heater core, and head gasket. Some of these are obvious. You'll see green or orange fluid on the ground. Others are sneaky. A head gasket leak can push coolant out the exhaust. You won't see a puddle, but you'll smell something sweet from the tailpipe or see white smoke. The worst thing you can do is keep topping it off without investigating. You're just delaying the inevitable failure, and the longer you wait, the more damage occurs. I've seen people drive for months with a slow head gasket leak, adding coolant every week. By the time they finally brought it in, the engine had overheated multiple times and the head was warped beyond repair. A $400 hose replacement turned into a $4,200 engine rebuild because they ignored the warning signs. Trick 10. Don't overload your vehicle. Every vehicle has a maximum payload capacity. It's listed on a sticker inside the driver's door jamb. That number includes passengers, cargo, everything. Most people ignore it. I've seen crossovers loaded down with 800 pounds of construction materials. The rear suspension was bottomed out, the front wheels barely touched the ground, and the whole thing drove like a shopping cart with a broken wheel. 2 months later, both rear shocks were blown, the tires were cupped from uneven wear, and the alignment was destroyed. That repair ran $1,400, and the guy still needed new tires. And all because he treated his Honda CR-V like a dump truck. I know what my car's payload limit is. I stay under it. If I need to haul something heavy, I rent a truck or make 2 trips. It's not worth destroying my suspension to save an hour. Extra weight doesn't just wear out shocks and springs. It increases stopping distance, puts more stress on the brakes, and makes the car harder to control in an emergency. Every 100 pounds you add is equivalent to 1,000 pounds of force during a hard stop. Do the math if you're carrying 500 pounds of stuff you don't need. Trick 9. Track down every strange noise. I hear things other people don't, or maybe I just don't ignore them. A slight ticking from the engine, a clunk from the front end when I go over bumps, a whine from the transmission that changes with speed. These aren't just annoyances, they're warnings. Every strange noise is your car trying to tell you something is wrong. The earlier you catch it, the cheaper it is to fix. A squealing belt costs $40 to replace. Wait until it breaks, and now you're replacing the alternator it was driving, which costs $600. A clunk from a CV joint costs $200 to fix. Ignore it, and the joint fails completely, taking out the axle boot, contaminating the bearing. And now you're at $800. I keep a mental note of every sound my car makes. When something changes, I investigate. I'll get under the car with a flashlight. I'll have someone else drive while I listen from different positions. I'll track when the sound happens. Only when cold. Only when turning. Only at certain speeds. That information helps narrow down the cause. Most mechanics will tell you the same thing. The customers who catch problems early spend way less money than the ones who ignore warning signs until something catastrophic fails. Trick 8. Keep your foot off the clutch pedal. This one's for manual transmission drivers. Resting your foot on the clutch pedal seems harmless. You're barely touching it. But even a little bit of pressure is enough to partially disengage the clutch. That creates friction, which creates heat, which wears out the clutch disc. I've seen clutches fail at 40,000 miles because the driver rode the pedal constantly. A clutch replacement runs $1,200 to $1,800 depending on the car. My clutch lasted 280,000 miles before I replaced it, and I only replaced it because I was in there doing a rear main seal and figured I might as well while everything was apart. The correct technique is simple. Foot on the clutch only when you're shifting. At red lights, shift to neutral and take your foot off the pedal. On hills, use the handbrake to hold position, not the clutch. That's how you get 200,000 plus miles from a clutch. I've taught this to at least a dozen people over the years. The ones who listened got great clutch life. The ones who kept riding the pedal kept paying for replacements. Trick 7. Never let your fuel tank drop below a quarter. Your fuel pump sits inside the gas tank. It uses gasoline to stay cool. When you run the tank low, the pump starts sucking in hot air instead of cool fuel. That makes it overheat. Over time, the pump wears out prematurely. A fuel pump replacement costs $600 to $900, depending on whether the tank has to be dropped. I've seen pumps fail at 80,000 miles because the driver constantly ran on fumes. There's also sediment at the bottom of every gas tank. Rust particles, dirt, debris. When your fuel level is normal, that stuff stays at the bottom. When it's low, the pump sucks it up and sends it toward your fuel filter and injectors. That causes rough running, poor fuel economy, and eventually injector failure. I keep my tank above a quarter at all times. If I'm on a road trip and the gauge shows half, I start looking for a gas station. I'm not risking a fuel pump failure in the middle of nowhere to save one extra stop. It's cheap insurance for an expensive part. Plus, if you ever break down or get stuck in traffic, you've got fuel to run the heater or air conditioning while you wait for help. Trick 6. Replace spark plugs at 60,000 miles. Spark plugs seem like a small thing. They're only $10 each. But worn-out plugs can destroy an engine. The electrode gradually erodes away. The gap widens. Eventually, the spark becomes weak or inconsistent. That causes misfires. Misfires dump unburned fuel into the catalytic converter, which overheats and melts the substrate inside. A catalytic converter costs $1,200 to $2,500 to replace, all because someone didn't want to spend $60 on spark plugs. I've seen iridium plugs advertised as lasting 100,000 miles. That's under perfect conditions. In the real world, with direct injection engines and short trips, you should check them at 60,000 and replace if needed. I use quality plugs, NGK or Denso for Japanese cars, Motorcraft for Fords, AC Delco for GM vehicles. I've tried cheap aftermarket plugs exactly once. They fouled in 10,000 miles and caused a misfire that threw a check engine light. Lesson learned, I also gap my plugs before installation, even if they come pre-gapped. Sometimes they get knocked during shipping. A gap that's off by even 0.005 inches can cause problems. Takes 5 minutes with a gap tool to check all of them. Trick 5. Test your engine mounts every 100,000 miles. Engine mounts fail slowly. You don't notice it at first. Maybe there's a slight vibration at idle. Maybe the shifter shudders a bit when you drop into gear. Most people ignore it, but broken engine mounts let the engine move around more than it should. That movement stresses everything connected to it. Exhaust manifolds crack, CV axles wear out early, transmission mounts fail. I test my mounts every 100,000 miles. Here's how. Put your foot on the brake, shift into drive, and give it a quick rev to about 2,000 RPM. The engine should lift slightly, but not more than an inch. If it's jumping all over the place, your mounts are done. I caught a failing mount at 520,000 miles. The rubber had separated from the metal bracket. Another month and it would have completely torn apart. Replacing it cost $180. If I'd waited, the engine would have twisted enough to crack the exhaust manifold. That's a $600 part plus 4 hours of labor. Engine mounts aren't exciting, but they're critical. And they do wear out, especially if you do a lot of city driving with frequent starts and stops. Trick 4. Rinse the undercarriage monthly. Everyone washes the body of their car. Almost nobody washes underneath. That's where rust starts. Salt from winter roads, mud, dirt, all of it sticks to the frame, suspension components, and brake lines. It holds moisture against the metal. Corrosion starts immediately. I've seen brake lines so rusted they look like lace. One guy's brake line burst while he was driving because it was eaten through from years of accumulated road salt. He was lucky he didn't crash. The repair cost $800 because we had to replace multiple lines that were all corroded. I rinse the undercarriage of my car once a month in winter, twice a month if I'm driving on salted roads frequently. Some car washes have undercarriage spray options. I use those. Or I'll just spray underneath with a garden hose at home. The goal is to wash off the salt before it has time to do damage. It's not about making it pretty. It's about preserving the structural integrity of the vehicle. Rust doesn't take years anymore. Modern road salt is aggressive. One season can cause damage that spreads for the rest of the car's life. Trick 3. Get a second opinion on every major repair. Dealerships and chain shops exist to make money. Some of them do it honestly. Others train their service advisors to upsell unnecessary work. I've seen people get hit with $1,400 estimates For oil changes, because the advisor tacked on a fuel system cleaning, brake fluid flush, cabin air filter, and engine air filter. Most of it wasn't needed. The brake fluid was fine. The filters had been replaced recently, but the customer didn't know that, so they approved the work. I've also seen dealerships recommend spark plug replacements at 30,000 miles on a car that has 100,000-mile plugs, or transmission flushes on a brand new vehicle. If someone quotes you more than $500 for a repair, get a second opinion. Find an independent mechanic who doesn't work on commission. Ask to see the problem. A good mechanic will show you the worn brake pads or the leaking gasket. They'll explain why it needs to be fixed now versus later. If someone can't or won't show you, that's a red flag. I'm not saying every dealership is crooked, but I am saying their business model depends on you approving high-dollar work. Protect yourself by verifying. Trick 2. Clean battery terminals every 3 months. Battery corrosion is one of the most common no-start causes I've seen. That white or blue crusty buildup on the terminals creates resistance. Your starter can't get enough power to turn the engine. Your alternator has to work harder to charge the battery. Eventually, something fails. I've had people ready to buy a new starter until I cleaned their battery terminals and the car started fine. A new starter would have cost $400 installed. Cleaning the terminals cost nothing. Every 3 months, I pop the hood and check my battery. If there's any corrosion, I disconnect the cables and scrub the terminals with a wire brush. Then I coat them with dielectric grease or terminal protector spray. That prevents corrosion from forming. The whole process takes 10 minutes. It saved me from being stranded more than once. It's also saved me from unnecessary alternator and starter replacements. Electrical components last longer when they don't have to fight through corroded connections. Simple maintenance that most people never think about. Trick 1. Use the parking brake every single time. This is the habit that saved me the most money. Every time I park, I set the parking brake before I shift into park. Not after. Before. Here's why. Your transmission has a small metal pawl that locks it in place when you shift to park. That pawl is strong enough to hold your car on flat ground, but on even a slight incline, you're putting thousands of pounds of force on a piece of metal the size of your thumb. I've seen parking pawls break. When they do, the car rolls away, and you're looking at a $2,800 transmission teardown to replace it. The parking brake holds the car with the actual brakes. When you set it first, then shift to park, the pawl barely engages. It's there as a backup, not as the main holding force. I've been doing this for 23 years. I've never had a parking pawl fail. I've never had my car roll away. And I've probably saved $6,000 in potential transmission repairs over the life of the car. It's a 5-second habit that costs nothing and protects one of the most expensive components on your vehicle. Uphill, downhill, flat ground, doesn't matter. Parking brake on, then shift to park. Every single time. These 17 habits aren't exciting. They won't make your car faster or better looking. But they're the reason I've driven the same car for over 700,000 miles while most people are on their third or fourth vehicle. Consistency matters. Maintenance matters. And not trusting everything a dealership tells you definitely matters. Hit that like button and subscribe if you'd like to learn more about how to take care of your car.